All right, welcome everybody. Here is another episode of The Independent. I'm here with John Brooks. John Brooks is a former congressional candidate here in San Diego for the former District 53. He is now a filmmaker living abroad. And John, welcome to The Independent.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Perfect. And, John, we met obviously when we both ran for Congress in the 53rd District. And, I always really appreciated your insight, your openness, your wanting to also help other candidates, and, had a genuine interest in cleaning up the system, making the system more equitable, more accessible. But before I get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about, you're a filmmaker right now, living abroad. How did that, can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now and where you're at?
Sure. So my interest in film spans back when I was a federal agent, because I used to, document evidence and all that, but then I would go a little further and I would create these stories for the department. And I just took an interest, and I took classes on the side, and I kind of use that as like an undercover cover at sometimes. And then when I retired, I decided, I'm a musician too, so I decided to go more artistic than with the law enforcement and biology. And so I went to school in Budapest in 2015 for filmmaking. And I realized how much I didn't know about filmmaking once I started going to school for it. And I started loving it. And I saw it as a vehicle to reach people, because as humans, we're very social and we love a good story. So if I can tell a good story that's compelling and move people into action, that's what I wanted to do.
Awesome.
Oh, so you asked, what am I doing here? So I left San Diego in just after the pandemic, 2021. And I thought, I need to travel around, see the world a little bit before, it implodes. And I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but if you remember when I was running for Congress, I was big on climate change. Nobody was listening to me. Here we are. So, so I went to Colombia, totally enjoyed my time down there. And then I came over to Portugal just because people had recommended it. And when I got here, I was very pleasantly surprised. Big international community, very walkable, which I like, walkable cities and all that kind of stuff. Fresh fruit, vegetables everywhere. And I thought, I can make this a base for seeing the rest of Europe for at least a couple of years. And when I was here, I got the idea to do two films. One I had already started, was on people with tattoos. And the second was on digital nomads. It's phenomenal, people working remotely outside their home country or home city. And I'm currently working on that. But also, the third film, there were three, was a narrative film, a short film about climate change. It's called We Don't Deserve to Be Here. And it was like a what if scenario. The year's 2028. We realize now that climate change is real, but there's nothing we can do about it. But governments had a plan B. And so that's what the film's about.
Awesome. And, you're originally from the Bay Area, is that correct?
Correct, Oakland.
Can you tell me, and you kind of grew, from my understanding, you grew up in a time where Oakland was very active, I would say, politically, socially. Will you tell me, can you explain a little bit about your background, how you grew up, and how that influences you today?
Sure. So my parents are from the South, and their families were part of that great migration from the South to the North during the war, because there were jobs available for Black people, because there were no white people to take the jobs. They were all fighting. So it was like, hey, we had to hire these people, and there were good paying jobs in the shipyards as welders, builders, all this kind of stuff. Many families at that time were able to gather wealth, put away some money, and buy homes. And so my family settled in the Bay Area, Oakland. And my father, actually, I don't know if I mentioned this when I was campaigning, but he was like one of two Black police officers, the first two in the city of Oakland. Yeah. He never told me the whole story, but he gave me bits and pieces. So when I was growing up in the 60s, you got to keep in mind, all this was normal for me. So the Black Panthers were going on, the Afro-American movement was in full swing, the Civil Rights movement, Hell's Angels were there. And I was like right in the middle of it. And it was an interesting time. So I a couple of key points in my life at that time when you're saying how it influenced me. I remember one time I saw a black kid on the street. And we were driving down, going somewhere, and I looked at him, and we caught eyes. And I said to my father, I said, he doesn't look like me. He doesn't look like me. You know, my father thought I was crazy. Even though I had cousins and brothers, the narrative was that we heard a lot back then was all black people look alike.
Right.
And so as a kid, you absorb this. You don't know what's real, what's not. You're absorbing all the information. Yeah. And that was in my head that all black people looked alike. Yeah. And the second was we were watching TV, I don't know the year, and the news said more Negroes are moving into the area. And they showed this picture of a woman in a convertible. She was black, driving. And I got scared. I go, Mommy, more Negroes. And what are we going to do? It was like aliens. That's how he was saying it.
Yeah.
It totally blew me off. But those type of things. And then the Afro-American movement where Black Pride was being pushed up and the Black Panthers were there with their feed the community program and after school programs and all that kind of stuff. And so I got a really good taste of what it meant to be a black person and that we didn't have to believe the narrative that was taking place during that time. A couple more points if I may.
Yeah.
Most blacks at that time were Republicans. That was the time where the Southern Democrats were there and all this kind of stuff. And I remember also my mother saying, I'm a Democrat now, you know, and of course I didn't know what that meant. Yeah. And Barry Goldwater was running for president. I remember that. And a lot of blacks moved in droves to the Democratic Party at that time. And since my family was from the South, I had been there a couple of times on road trips. And there was a difference as we crossed that Mason-Dixon area on how we were treated and how our parents were protecting us. It wasn't until a long time that I really caught on to that. So bottom line is all that influenced me, and I had this sense of social justice my whole life, you know, trying to do the right thing, trying to make equity for everybody, and no one should be treated differently or excluded. So yeah, that's pretty much, but it was subconscious. I didn't know that I was being led this way, but yeah, that's what happened.
How was, I mean, I don't know if your dad talked about it, but how was that for your dad being a police officer? Did he, you know, retire as a police officer? You know, what was that experience like for him?
Yeah, so I'm actually writing a book, and I just was writing this chapter the other day. He didn't talk a lot about it, but the things I got out of him is one, all the blacks that applied for it that first year failed. Every one of them failed the test. And he told me, he says, John, there's no way I failed that test because there was another officer who was white who knew that they had it out for the black people. And he gave them a copy of the test so they knew what the answers were, and they all still failed. So there was some lawsuit going on. I don't remember all the details. And so a few were allowed to retake it. He retook it like a year or so later and passed, him and this other guy. And he said the first day on the job when he went in there, the word was on their lockers. Wow. Nobody was talking to him. Yeah, it was just cold shoulder. And he was teamed up with a white officer because they paired up in those days. Yeah. He said, out to the squad car. And as he got there, the guy just took off and left him there. And I said, what'd you do? And he says, I just stood my whole shift right there in front of the police station. Wow. So it was tough. Yeah. He didn't retire as a police officer. He didn't draw a pension. He went back to school and got his degree in criminology and became a parole commissioner for the state of California. He retired in that. Okay. But yeah, all that really, and he grew up in a time that was, you know, he was in Jim Crow. Right. That time period from the South Mississippi. So he was closed-lipped about a lot of stuff, and I know that really affected him. And you know, there was no outlet to talk to people at that time, so he held a lot of it in. Yeah.
How did people in Oakland? How did they perceive black police officers? Did they see them as allies, or was it, you know, how was it at that time?
In the beginning, it was like, yeah, our people, you know. Yeah. But then during the Black Panthers, when the government was really riding those guys, it was like they were pigs too. That's what they called cops back then, pigs. Right. So everybody was a pig. And he told me also he was recruited to be an undercover agent to go and infiltrate the Black Panthers. And he said he wouldn't do it because there were a few blacks, you know, and they needed someone to look like him to get in. Yeah. Very similar to that story that was just that movie that I don't remember the name, but on the Black Panthers in Chicago was very similar story. Yeah.
Wow.
So they weren't treated well. Yeah.
That's
Because
crazy.
think about it, they had to walk a fine line. They're trying to fit in with the rest of the officers,
Hmm.
but then they see all this abuse happening to their own people. It's like, that was a
Yeah.
bad situation to be in.
Yeah. And also you're dealing with the fact that you kind of have to do well in order for the next crop of officers to come and make it. So you don't
Right.
want to ruin it for the future. That's
Right.
that's a heavy burden to carry,
Yeah, totally.
especially in those days. And so but let me go to the Black Panthers. What was your view growing up of the Black Panthers?
Loved them.
Yeah.
They were so cool.
Yeah.
Huey P. Newton lived right down the street, and you
Yeah.
see them walk around with their berets and their black leather jackets and very militant and like, we're not taking this anymore. But there was a split because I was a kid, right? So I think the majority of my family, extended as well, were more for the civil rights peaceful way.
Yeah.
But a few of them were like, no, right on, we need to stop, especially the men that were in their 20s.
Yeah.
They'd had enough of being beaten up and, stop for no reason, harass. And they were 100% behind the Panthers. And it's unfortunate that there's a misconception that the Black Panthers were a radical group. They weren't. They were just trying to protect community. And back then you could legally carry firearms. And that's what they did because no one was protecting us.
Yeah.
So they were good. And they treated the children right. Interesting story also is the Hells Angels were good to me too, because they lived right down the street from me.
Yeah.
We used to walk by and see with their motorcycles. They were totally cool.
Yeah. That's awesome. One of the things that one of the big issues in our campaign when we were running, and it's a huge issue in our country, is money in politics. Because you can literally buy an election if you have enough money. Tell me your thoughts about the negative, obviously, well, maybe in short, the negative effects of money in politics and some of the things you think we can do to limit it, I guess you could say, the influence of money in politics, if any.
The negative effects is just that you can buy the election.
Yeah.
Maybe not literally, here's my money, give me the seat. Yeah. But it totally does. And unfortunately, us voters were very influenced by political ads, negative or positive, whatever. Whoever has the most money gets the most coverage. And just like Santos, most of those candidates fabricate their background and no one challenges them on it. Yeah. This guy got challenged because he played the Jewish card. I think that's what really got him in trouble, but the other candidates lie too. Yeah. And no one challenges them on it. And so if the more money you have, the squeaky wheel type of thing, you have money, you can buy whatever you want. And people go along with that because and I think I said this a couple of times without trying to insult someone, I said it's our fault because we're not doing our due diligence, really researching these candidates. Granted, we don't have a lot of time and they play into that. So, okay, who are you voting for? Okay, I'll just vote for him. Or well, this guy looks good. I like this commercial. You're not saying that out loud, but subliminally you are saying that. Oh, they have a good record. One person actually told me this about Sarah Jacobs. She said, well, her family really treats the community well, meaning her family, buys things or donates to causes. And so that was her reason for voting for Susan Jacobs.
Wow.
Yeah, it's sad. So I think we really need to stress and push civil, what's the word I'm looking for? Civic duties in schools. If kids are taught this when they're growing up from grade school and up to high school, it becomes second nature. It's not going to be work, but for them now it's work. Yeah. But if you're taught and you're following elections as you go along, you want to be involved and you're going to research it and you because they're representing you.
Yeah. So. Well, one of the ideas, and I don't know if they do this some places, but where automatic in high school, they will actually come and register you to vote in high school so that you're registered. You can even prior to that, do a mock election saying, hey, we're going to do mock. So that way you understand what it means to go to the ballot, pick somebody, and hopefully you carry that forward.
I think that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, we have student councils in school, but we do the whole election thing, but it's not explained to us what this process is about and why it's important for your future. Yeah. And that's the issue.
What are your thoughts on like campaign finance reform and especially public financing of elections?
I think elections should be publicly financed. I think
Yeah,
candidates should have to go to, let's say, C-SPAN.
yeah,
You want to do an ad, you go to C-SPAN, and us as informed voters will go there to see your ad. Shouldn't be any ads allowed on TV, commercial, because it's poison. I mean, it
yeah,
really is. So elections should be public. Everyone should have a right to run, and not limited to like the top five, popularity contest people. And yeah, publicly funded elections has to be the way. That's the only way we're going to get out of this.
yeah. What are your thoughts on ranked choice voting? I know.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love it. Under the system we are now, that is the only thing that can save us.
yeah,
Because many of yours may not know, but basically it's just like, um, give me an example. I mean, it happens all the time in other things. If your top guy doesn't get in, your vote goes to the next guy that you wanted. So you and I, as an example, they're not really electable. They don't have a lot of money. So I'm gonna vote for this person. I'm gonna vote for you first. And if he doesn't get enough votes, then I want my vote to go to the person,
yeah,
who has a lot of money and probably gonna win anyway. Yeah.
yeah. And it creates a situation where I mean, I'm a big believer in ranked choice voting myself. And I think from not just a voter perspective, but from a candidate perspective, if you go, there's a lot of instances where candidates will go, if let's just say somebody's a Republican, well, they won't even talk to a Democrat because they know their vote maybe, hey, they're not going to vote for me anyways. So what it means is they're not even going to hear them. Whereas if you're a Republican, you can say, hey, maybe that's who you vote for. Can I get your second vote? Can I get your number two? Let me tell you about myself. Let me tell you about my ideas. And it makes a candidate be more inclusive and willing to talk to the people, everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you're not in this mindset, well, it's the lesser of two evils and throwing away your vote because they're not with a major party. Just as a point of reference, also, I was an independent before I ran for office. The only reason I went to the Democratic Party is because those are the only two parties that people pay attention to, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I wanted to touch on too is your dad was a police officer, and then you were also a police officer and worked in law enforcement. Tell me about that. How did you end up going into law enforcement? How was your experience? If you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, it wasn't anything I was trying to get into. I was a wildlife biologist. That's what I went for school. And during the Reagan years, and then I was RIFT, reduction in force, as a biologist. So I had to find another position. And looking through the Department of Interior, they had these jobs called special agents. And they had them for also in conservation work, wildlife. And it said, you're the first line of defense, stopping endangered species from coming in the country, Actually, was a wildlife inspector first. And I said, that sounds interesting. I want to do that, So I applied for that job and I was accepted. And then I moved to Dallas, Fort Worth. I did that for 3 years. We had the highest seizure rate in the nation at that time because ivory smuggling was very, very big at that time, and also sea turtle products and live animals. And then I applied for the special agent job, which is like a detective for the police department. So wildlife inspector would be the uniform officer. The special agent would be the detective. So that's the person that investigates crime. Like if you called me, hey, my neighbor has lights on at night, there's birds flying around, whatever. I would investigate that crime or that potential crime. And it also involved going undercover at times and giving lectures in foreign countries and working with foreign governments and embassies and all that kind of stuff. And it was my first year, I felt so inadequate and I wanted to quit because it dealt, in my mind, a lot of conflict. I'm confronting people, I'm accusing them of stuff, and that's not my nature. But one day, I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Jerk, where he learned how to dance. It clicked like that for me. Hey, I did it.
I love that movie.
So once I realized I could use my people skills, and it didn't have to be a jerk to people, that I could be really effective in this job. And then so I went on to be a senior special agent. I worked in 7 different or 9 different states. Like I said, I trained overseas and did undercover cases, and it was fun. I just used the skills that I already had in life and put them in the job. Yeah. Good job. Really good job.
This is kind of a random question. Have you ever seen the movie or the show Tiger King?
Yeah, I did watch it. It's funny because I had a case against him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they told me back off. We're not interested. Yeah.
Yeah. How do people like that? I mean, is having your own zoo? I mean, I think that was new for everybody. I didn't even know that was possible. But can people legally have zoos like that?
Yeah, because you can have a private zoo and you can have endangered species if they're bred in captivity, and that's what he was claiming his were. You weren't bringing them from the wild because the endangered species has a clause that yes, this species is endangered of tigers, but this particular tiger was raised in captivity, not from the wild. Therefore, it is only protected in interstate and foreign commerce. So within the state of Florida, I think that's where he was. It's okay to have it because the state permits it. And that's why he was able to, that's why a lot of people went to Florida.
Yeah.
Pythons, alligators, crocodiles, tigers. Yeah. And so what he was trading in interstate commerce, and that's what my case was about. And I was researching it and then, sent it up because someone called me, I'm sure is what happened. So I investigated and I deemed that, hey, there's something here. I need to look into this. So I sent it up the line to get approval. And they said, no, we're not interested in domestic cats. Yeah.
Well, we had a discussion once before that the transporting of animals kind of similar or animal endangered products or, I don't know the correct terminology, is very similar to like the drug game where the people at the bottom really don't make anything as opposed to the people at the top. And, the people at the bottom are kind of the victims almost.
Yeah, 100%.
And can you tell me a little bit about how when you would communicate with some of these people, you would talk about, hey, trying to explain to them, hey, you're getting paid $200. This guy's making $100,000,
Yeah. So in San Diego, I was called to the Mexican border many times, middle of the night, because someone was smuggling live parrots. That was really popular in the 90s and early 2000s. And it would be this person, we call him a mule, basically, who was paid $50 to take this load of 500 birds across the border and give them to someone else, who then would disseminate them across the United States and sell them for $2,000 and up. So I was good at this, by the way. I know you're making me reminisce.
Yeah.
Basically, again, like I said, I didn't browbeat these people, call them dirtbags or you're going to jail. And I was their friend. And I really meant it. I wasn't like playing them either. It was like, listen, dude. And they were usually from Mexico or poor Mexican Americans from San Diego that had family over there. And they were doing it only because they needed the money, And I realized that. So I told him that. I says, look, man, would you get paid $50 for this? Okay. And like, how many birds do you have? And we would go through this whole scenario and then I would walk them through it. So the guy you're working for is using you. Yeah. And if it was a Mexican, I would say, these Americans are going to your country, raping your country, taking stuff that you can make money off of in different ways. You're being used, you're being played. It's just like colonialism all over again. I would say stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I would turn people. They were still going to jail, and I wouldn't lie about that. I said, look, you did this crime, you got to man up. But you can help me make sure this doesn't happen to your other family members, and we can get this guy, and you can make money in a different way. So when you get out of jail, come see me. And people did, and they would help me. They became informants.
Wow. One of the things about what are your thoughts, since you do have this law enforcement background, you've worked with people, what are your thoughts about law enforcement in today's environment? How they treat people, how they're perceived. What are, I don't know if you communicate still with people, a lot of people in law enforcement still, but what are your feelings about it?
Yeah, it's very sad. And when I see the things that have happened over, let's say, the past 5 years or so, with officers shooting people unarmed and saying I thought it was a wallet or whatever, thought I had a gun, it's terrible. And that comes from police culture. Yeah. You come in as a rookie, you're taught by someone else who's already been jaded by the system, and he or she tells you that guy's a bad guy, these guys are bad guys, da 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 da. And you just like a kid, you absorb it and you become part of that because you don't want to be ostracized because that thin green line.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the thin blue line. Green's long or wildlife. But yeah, and you get caught and you see things. And I've talked to officers, San Diego PD, that we've had this discussion that we're about to retire. They say, yeah, I saw this, but what am I going to do? Because you got to have someone having your back as a uniformed officer, right?
Yeah.
So they were really in bad situations, like with what's his name? I forgot his name. The gentleman that was choked out on the East Coast.
George Floyd?
Yeah. The other officers standing around, they
Right.
knew this was wrong, but again, they didn't do anything because that code, and they should have stepped in, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
They didn't step in, and that's why they were convicted too. They should have stepped in. So I have given lectures before all that stuff was happening, telling people who wanted to get in law enforcement, because I think Montana, when I went back up to give a lecture on law enforcement, and I brought this topic up before these murders started happening. I said, if you want to be in law enforcement and you're afraid for your life, because a lot of officers would say that, oh, I was afraid he was a big black guy, da 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 da, and a person in the jury is going to think, yeah, I guess I would be afraid too. But that person in the jury is not trained, right? If you're a trained law enforcement officer and you're saying you're afraid for your life, you should not have this job. You need to go find another job, because that's like saying a fireman saying, I'm afraid to go in that burning building, knowing you could die. So to say, oh, I was afraid he was big, so I shot him, or it was a wallet. We're not trained. Let me back up. We weren't trained to be proactive in stopping a situation. We were reactionary force. Police are reactionary. So I don't shoot anybody until I see they have a gun and they shoot me. Because a gun, I can have a gun. It's not illegal. See? So when the guy who got shot in the car, he said, he told him, I have a gun. All right, don't go for it. I'm not. And the guy started freaking out because, again, this training from the street, oh, this black guy is dangerous. He's going for a gun, even though he told me he's not. I'm going to shoot him. And then doesn't give him first aid. I mean, so the police culture today is wrong. It's so wrong. I can go on and on, but it's wrong. It needs to change. It needs overhaul.
A lot of what are your thoughts on like the Black Lives Matter movement? I mean, I hear a lot of talk about, there's some people who feel, hey, I don't like the organization because maybe they have their thoughts about the leadership, but I'm with the idea of course, Black Lives Matter, and what's your sentiment? What's your feeling about that?
So the organization is corrupt,
right?
And they got in trouble for that. But the idea, what they started, the genuine idea, was golden, because what we were trying to say was, okay, I know all lives matter. That thing came up. Come on, you saying that tells me right now that no, they don't, because if they did, we wouldn't be getting shot in the numbers we have throughout history since Jim Crow times. Our lives don't matter, and that's what that slogan meant. The society says black people don't matter. It's just a black guy. There's thousands of them. It'll be okay. They'll forget about it. But we're trying to say, no, black lives do matter, because not only do they matter to us, but also to the community whole. Think about all the knowledge being lost by all the kids not being educated properly. There's a black guy out there or an Asian guy out there that could hold the cure to cancer, but they're not given the opportunity because of this kind of systemic racism. And that's what we're saying. So I 100% support that movement. We're not saying we're better than anybody else. We're saying, look, treat us equal, just like you. It's like, don't be afraid of us. Because, sorry, you got me rolling. I have been in the situation where, when I was growing up, where white people would walk across the street because they saw me and they were afraid. Because preconceived notions, black guy's going to rob me, whatever. I saw that. And it wasn't until I went overseas that I didn't experience that. And I go, whoa, this is interesting. So,
what, but, I'm going to stay on this topic just a little bit. What are there things, do you think it's a training issue for police? Like, is there even a solution, you think, to making things better?
This is going to take like 30, 40, 50 years to fix it. When they started in these departments where they had issues, and they started making the officers go to training and, sensitivity training or whatever, culture training. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
That's a waste of time. What you have to do is, when you bring an officer in new, first of all, when they go to the academy, that's where you start the training.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you start at the interview. You've got to do a psych training on these guys and see where their mind is.
Yeah.
You really, just like when you pick a jury, where's your mind? Can you be impartial and judge this person, with just the facts? You have to do that with police officers too. Once you pass that stage, and you may not get a lot.
Yeah.
But once you pass that stage, now you have to integrate them into the community. Like, part of their training should be, hey, you are going to go to this community and you're going to hang out with them.
Yeah.
You're just going to walk the street and be one of them. Just like, see that they're really just like you, but a different environment, maybe not as privileged as you, but maybe more. Who knows? But you're going to see, just because they act differently than you and speak differently doesn't mean they're different. We're all human, right?
Yeah.
So that has to be part of it. Then you go into being law enforcement, and then all departments must start realizing that you are a reactionary force. You are not there to find crimes. And a lot of people in uniform feel they have to go out and find a crime. That's not your job unless the rules have changed.
Yeah.
And as far as the use of force, all these guys who got shot, the first question I would have asked if I was the DA, did you follow your use of force policy? Every department has one on how to escalate up to when you have your gun out.
Yeah.
The ones I saw on TV totally violated policy, and yet they still were found not guilty.
Yeah.
Even the guy in New York who choked a guy out for cigarettes, he was allowed to go into the grand jury and testify. And that never happens. The grand jury is there to bring evidence to see if you can get what's called a true bill. Is there enough evidence to bring charges against this guy? If that's what a grand jury is for, why are you bringing in the subject to tell his side of the story? They didn't want to bring charges.
Yeah.
And then that time the New York officer turned their back on the captain because he didn't support one of their guys. That's got, you got to go. If you're doing that, you should not be in law enforcement. All those guys who turned their back should be fired. Yeah. Because you don't care about the public. That is who you're there to support, the public, not your fellow men in blue.
Yeah.
So.
And I heard somebody once say that, he's an ex-convict, and he said, he believes law enforcement is a very sacred and honorable profession. The problem is it attracts some of the most dishonorable people. Would you agree with that? Would you agree to some extent? Yes, I would. And my fellow officers might hate me for this, but I've said it before. Even when I was in law enforcement, I said, especially with street officers, most of the street cops are bullies. And that's as high as they will ever get in society. They probably were bullies in high school or picked on, and now it's payback. And so now they're bullying people because most people are afraid to lose their money. This is valuable to them. Like, that's why if you get stopped by a cop, oh, did I do anything wrong? You cower down because you don't want this person to take your money or cost you time and money and all this kind of stuff. Most of them are bullies. Yeah, 100%. And that's why you have to have a psych evaluation to weed these people out. We don't want bullies who want to get in a fight. And there's no reason to fight. Another point, and I hope people are listening to this. Yeah. The thing is, when a shooting happens or a police brutality thing happens, you just hear what the news tells you, and they're just getting the superficial story to give you a good story when they're reporting it to you. So you automatically go on one side or the other. Oh, he was abusing this man. Oh, he should have done what the cop told him to do, this kind of stuff. But the truth is, police, God, I forgot my point. Sorry, what was I going to say? It's terrible. I'm the same way. Well, because I was going off on 5 tangents in my mind. Yeah. But well, let me ask you. One of the things I wanted to get into too is, and it maybe this relates to what you're talking about. How have you seen society change, both good and bad, from when you were growing up to now? What would you say? Hey, this is a good thing I've noticed overall in our country, but these are some bad things I've noticed overall. The bad things would be, we as a society are more fearful about everything. We're just afraid. That's why people want to have a gun. Yeah. They're afraid. The good things are, technology has made it possible for information to be disseminated more quickly and widely, so people can get the truth
instead of just the one side of the story, that won't come out for 10 years in my time. So, and then you can assess, like, wait a minute, or see the video, in the case of shootings, and you can say, it doesn't look like he was a threat to me. So that's a positive thing. But as far as the body cams and all that kind of stuff, that shouldn't be necessary, but it is, because cops cover up when they do wrong. That's human nature.
Yeah.
You're going to try to cover it up.
Now, living in Portugal, living in Portugal, do you, we have a huge homeless issue here, especially in California. Do you see that in Europe or Portugal? Is that an issue over there as well?
One of the things my European friends always tell me when they visit California or the States, oh my God, look at all these homeless people. Because, they hear the American dream story that we take care of everyone, and they go to San Francisco or San Diego or LA and see the rows of homeless people. And they are 100% shocked.
Yeah.
So saying that, the answer is no, you don't have. You have people here, but not like you have in the United States.
Yeah.
There's like, I'll walk by maybe 5, and, because usually the guys with the mental issues, they want to be there, not because they can't afford a house. And they're working out of their car or something. Yeah, no, you don't have that over here. And
do you think it's more of a governmental thing, that, like, meaning that the government is more proactive, or is it just more of a social thing where the families they're more together? They're not going to let their brother or cousin go into the streets. They'll rather just take them in, or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of both.
Yeah.
On the social front, for instance, you still have humans. Street sweepers here, like in the old days, you seen a cartoon carrying a thing, and you still have that here because, hey, we're going to put you to work, and people do it. Try to do that in San Diego.
Yeah,
I want to do that.
Yeah,
right. But it's needed, and it's like, hey, let's put our let's give this guy a job, let's get him or her back on their feet, give him a place to stay. They do that here, so that's a good social program. And yes, families are more together, meaning the family unit's stronger in Europe than it is in the United States. And they will take a relative in before they let them go on the street unless they're just crazy.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And, since you're in Portugal, from my understanding, Portugal in terms of drugs is very, they've kind of basically decriminalized drugs over there, from my understanding. Have you noticed that? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Do you see drugs everywhere? Or is it just, kind of how it is everywhere else?
Interesting. You see the drugs in the tourist area. Okay. Because the tourists probably heard what you heard, and but they sell things from weed to coke to hash. I mean, it's like I was offered that stuff, but these guys have their corners. Yeah. They have a little territory that the police say, okay, fine, you can sell them here. Yeah. You can't sell there. There can't be too many of you. It's an unwritten rule. Yeah, they're selling them, and and then in the regular neighborhoods, I'm sure that goes on too. Yeah. But it's not. They're not putting people in prison for that kind of stuff. Yeah. Because they know what happens, and it's like, how are you going to control it? So let's control it the best we can. We will allow you to go this far. You go outside this, you're in trouble, type of thing.
Yeah, and you don't really see that. I'm going to go back to the homeless issue. You don't really see the drug problem leading into more homelessness, more crime. Decriminalizing hasn't increased any of those other effects.
No. Portugal, even though it's a popular country and destination, is still a poor country. Okay. So wages are very low. Most people work 2 jobs here, and they're just trying to make ends meet. So the crime you do see is petty crime, trying to steal something to get a couple of money, or, a couple of dollars to go buy something. But it happens, but you don't see, someone being stuck with a gun or murdered or, thrown in the river or something. You don't see that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit to go back to something I know you're passionate about, is climate change. Can you tell me, maybe go a little bit into the film you did about climate change, and, tell me some of your thoughts, your solutions. If you can tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's it's hard sometimes for me to say, I told you. You should listen. Because every day we work, it just gets worse and worse, and we're seeing it every day with the weather. You guys had snow, I heard.
Yeah. It's crazy weather right now.
Yeah, that's gonna be the norm, and I don't get upset about. I never really got upset about it because I'm just trying to present the facts to you, let you know this is what we're looking at. This will be the effect of it if we don't do it, but it's your choice.
Yeah.
I would choose this route, but
Yeah.
I don't speak for everybody. So the film kind of touches on that. Like I said, it takes place in 2028, where we've already passed the tipping point. It's too late, but governments have secretly been putting together. And we're doing this for real. We have categorized all living species on this planet, past and present, that we have access to through DNA and other means. And so in my film, the plan is the government's got together secretly, and they are going to put a key number of scientists into cryosleep, which they haven't perfected at the time, but they're perfecting it as we speak, and bring them back 1,500 years in the future. Now, in reality, it would take longer than that for the Earth to clean up, but I had to keep it relative, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So certain scientists, myself included, even though I retired, was pulled back in to be on this team, my character.
Yeah.
But my character doesn't believe in the program. He says, we already messed up. We're probably going to mess up again. What's to say we're not going to repeat what we've done?
Yeah.
We don't deserve to be here. Let's just call it a day. Let the next species come and take over. But, I don't have a voice, so I do my job. The film goes on with some glitches with the cryosleep, trying to perfect that before they go to sleep, because they have 1 year to get this done. And as that year goes on, chaos starts to develop outside, but they're in Cheyenne Mountain, if you know that military base in Colorado.
Yeah.
So they're protected. But all hell's breaking loose outside, and their families are out there. And so there's all this mental things they're dealing with, why us? But it's a good thing because we're saving humanity.
Yeah.
And my guy says, what about all the species that are going to mutate down the road? What are you going to do with them? Yeah. What if there's some hybrid form of human?
Yeah, yeah.
You're going to put them in a zoo or reservation? Yeah, that kind of stuff. So,
wow.
And then there's the ending. Yeah. So, but the point of this film is to say, look, let's just fix it now, so we don't have to worry about this in the future. That's the point of the film.
Do you think that's part of the reason why we're so, guys like Elon are trying to go to Mars, and do you think that's a big motivator?
Totally.
Yeah.
Because most people realize that we're probably not going to make it. We're not going to stay below 1.5 or even 2 degrees. Yeah. And so they are trying to develop a plan B. And again, that's going to be based on money. You got money, you can go.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I think you can colonize Mars as an example, but it's not going to be a lot of people, and it is going to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And how did you, looking back now in terms of how the U.S. handled, I'm going to kind of pivot to COVID now. What are your thoughts now that we kind of see how everything went? What are your thoughts on how we handled COVID? What, we're doing some Monday morning quarterbacking, but what do you think things we got right and things we got wrong?
The things we got wrong, going on the premise that the narrative we were told back then about it being in Wuhan, China and all that, let's just say that's the truth, because I don't know. Yeah. But let's say that is the truth. What happened? We did not react quick enough. We assumed, it's not coming over here. But people were already getting sick in the United States before it officially hit the United States. They didn't know what it was. So we didn't prepare for that properly. But I think even if we would have, we wouldn't have taken it seriously. Like if they would have said, hey, everyone, this is coming, you should wear a mask, just like climate change, unless you feel it and it's affecting you personally, you're not gonna take it seriously. So I don't think there's much the government could have done until people started dying. So that's number one. Second, it caused a big division in the population. The vaxxers versus the non-vaxxers, the disinformation, the science that wasn't in yet. And that's the big thing that bothered me. There wasn't enough science to justify everything they were saying. And now it's proven, that's true. For instance, like I got sick in March. Didn't know it was COVID. Pretty sure it was, but didn't know because I couldn't go to the doctor because you needed a doctor's hospital because you need a doctor's note to go to the hospital and the waiting line. So I said, I'm just going to tough it out.
Yeah.
So it was the worst 15 days of my life.
Wow.
But but I survived. And as a biologist, I knew that I probably was developing antibodies.
Yeah.
And it turns out I got tested in May that year, and I did have antibodies still working to fight the virus off. It was still in my system.
Yeah.
So I opted not to get the vaccine because it doesn't make, in my mind as a biologist, doesn't make sense to get something that my body is already working on, unless my body was losing the battle. There's no point in introducing an RNA vaccine, mRNA vaccine. And it turns out those antibodies stayed active in my system for at least 2 years. I've been tested since, but 2 years they were still going.
Wow.
And then I read papers that confirmed that. There was a study in California and New York that the CDC put out that said people who have had COVID and have developed antibodies will not benefit much from getting the vaccine.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. The divide that was even already here before COVID just kind of made it worse. It was so crazy is that, if, let's just say at the time Trump was president, if Trump was, hey, everybody, if he would have told his team, wear a mask, get a vaccine, it's like it would have been flipped. Then the Democrats would have been more, my body, my choice, more, I want to be free.
Right.
And it just seems like, okay, if they're for this, I got to be against it, and it just
sad.
Takes common sense out of the equation. So
sad.
Yeah. Now, to you, what are some of the main? I know, climate change. How would you maybe rank the top 3 problems we face as a country, as a world, as humanity? What are the 3 big things that you think we need to really focus on?
Right now, I think we need to address the civil war we're in. Yes, I'm calling it a civil war. Because think about it. The country is divided more than 50%. Yeah. We're not shooting at each other yet, but there is definitely a civil war going on. We need to have a conversation. Until we address the things from racism on up, or, slavery and reparations, all that kind of stuff, we're never going to heal, And Trump declaring he's running for president again is just fueling that fire.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be some problems coming up in 2024. So this is the number one thing that needs to be addressed. There needs to be a national conversation. The second, climate change.
Yeah.
And you can't say, well, and this is when we were running, this is what people were telling me, well, yeah, but we need the jobs. And what about this and that? That is all irrelevant and secondary to you having a place to live on this planet. Yeah. And if we address the issues that climate change is going to bring, it's going to bring new innovation and jobs. It's going to happen. Yeah. And we can train you for that. But to say you want to live like the way, it's not going to happen. We can't do that. We can't afford it. One of the reasons I came to Europe, I think I said this, but I'm going to say it again, was because they have cars, but they have a great public transportation system. And I love that. I walk everywhere, or I get on the bus, or the tram, the trolley, whatever. You can't do that in San Diego.
Yeah.
And that's a shame. The greatest country on the planet doesn't have good public transportation to get their people around, to get them to work. So you have to have a car to drive somewhere. And if you get a DUI or something where you lose your license, now you have to violate the law because you have to feed yourself. Yeah. And, it's just crazy stuff like that. But I'm digressing. So the national conversation, yes, climate change, and the third one would be, which ties into the first 2. You need to start not being so fearful of your neighbor. Because think about it, this Second Amendment thing that was brought up when we were running, about having guns, it wasn't meant to protect you against your neighbor. It was meant to protect you against governments.
Right.
And we've turned it around like, I'm afraid of my neighbor. If someone breaks in my house, I want to protect myself. But half the people have guns, don't know how to use them.
Yeah.
It's just sad. And why do you need a gun? And I think I said this at one of our debates. I said, guns don't stop bullets. So now you just got 2 people guns shooting, spraying in the air, and people getting shot. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
What happened to the conversation? Why can't we talk things out?
Yeah.
And I think with those, the whole thing about the police issue, policing in general, needs to go back to being for the people. I'm here to protect you, to make sure everything's cool, not to What are you doing? What do you have in your car? And I need to see this. And why you look like that? And what's that in your pocket? Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember the point. Thank you so much. The point was, before I forget it again. Oh man, I forgot it again. It's terrible. I'm not senile, people. Sorry. It's just I have a lot of thoughts going in my head.
That's all right.
Yeah, I forgot it again. There's something about cops. Go ahead.
How do living abroad? How do people view Americans?
Yeah, with fascination. They like the fact that America is a big country and we can, freedom to travel within our country, and that we have money and Hollywood and all this kind of stuff. But they look at these shootings that happen every day, the mass shootings, and they're like, what is going on with you guys?
Yeah.
And then a 6-year-old kid come on. They're like, I don't think I want to go to the United States anymore. Yeah, that's pretty much what's happening now.
Yeah. Wow. Well, John, hey, I really, I was going to wrap it up here, and I just want to say thank you. I want to give opportunity too. How can people, if somebody wants to see one of your films, what's the best way to go about doing that?
I have a website called I Am John Brooks.
Okay.
And that'll link to my films and everything else I'm doing now.
Okay, perfect.
And
well, John, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you coming on, and I wish you the best in Portugal, and hope to we can stay in contact. Yeah,
thanks for the invitation to be on your show. I wish you a lot. I hope people are really going to take to heart the people you have that you're interviewing and listen to different perspectives. I think it's great. Keep it independent. Awesome. Thank you, John, and you have a great rest of your day. Cheers. Thank you.